Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? A slight late start. Once again, basketball camp lasts all week. Good day at basketball camp, in case you were looking for an update. Justice tells me levels are 5 by 5, which of course he tells me every day. But of course, it is attributed quite correctly, I think, to Melania Trump this morning, who also is responsible for the break in my voice there. That was something she did first, and I just thought of a great excuse. If we take the rest of the week off and do reruns, we can say we're not in reruns, it's just we're having Melania Trump guest host. How about that speech last night? I only turned the convention on for about 2 minutes just to make sure it was on television, and it was Melania Trump's speech, and it was the section which ended up being plagiarized, and I can see why she plagiarized it. It's a perfectly acceptable spousal speech for great for convention purposes. And I do admit to watching it and saying, okay, I mean, there's certainly nothing wrong with this speech. It's just, I don't know if it's terrific or anything, but okay, she's doing an admirable job. She's not saying anything crazy, doing all the things she's supposed to be doing. Then it turns out, I guess, because it was good stuff because it's tried and true stuff. It certainly didn't strike me as obviously someone else's speech, but that's probably because even when it was made by Michelle Obama, it was kind of like, okay, that part of the speech anyway. Okay, this is good. It's fine. Nothing spectacular. The totality of the speech was, they were probably quite different. I didn't capture either one of them, so I don't know. I'm depending on you to tell me. But what a night. Oh, boy. And it's an awful lot of it to have been a total coincidence. The only thing I can think of by way of excuse for this thing is there's a very narrow band within which the spouses of the candidates can really be expected to be allowed, really, to say certain things. And clearly the speech is going to be about what a great person the spouse is, the spouse that's running, of course, and how they are working hard to instill terrific values in their kids, hard work, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. So, I wasn't expecting great things. But as was pointed out last night, our own Hunter over at Daily Kos pointing it out, the most egregious part of it really is, they stole the part of the speech that was about doing hard work and, making life pay off by forging your own path sort of thing. And honesty, hard work, that's not the one. That's not the passage you're going to want to rip off. Of course, even more people are talking about the Rickroll, which is rather amazing too. And it's even theorized that was done intentionally to signal to people that the speechwriters had purposefully sabotaged the thing. I don't know if I go that far, but that raises yet another issue, which is that Trump being Trump and Melania being under Trump's control, she spent the days ahead of the convention insisting that she had not used a speechwriter and had written the whole thing herself. So I guess that leaves her in the uncomfortable position of saying she's either to blame or was lying the first time. But just to get out ahead of that, Paul Manafort, spin doctor supreme, is already out insisting that it was not plagiarized at all, and so nobody's at fault about anything. It's probably Hillary Clinton's fault. I expect that by noon he'll be accusing Michelle Obama of having time traveled and plagiarized Melania. And as I said in the tweet this morning, by 3 p.m., Mark Halperin will print that as gospel truth. Other things happened. I don't know what they are, though. My mind went blank when we got to the Rickroll. How about you, Greg?
Well, it's hard to kind of ignore the whole thing there.
It is. Well, it's certainly on everyone's minds, and I do expect the spin folks to be out hard today, but everyone, the counterfactual was Morning Joe, I guess.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, Morning Joe was pretty amusing because not only were they just destroying the non-existent Trump campaign for screwing this up, but couldn't get over the fact that if you're going to plagiarize, why don't you plagiarize from a Republican? Joe
Yeah.
Scarborough kept saying, why don't you do Mamie Eisenhower? What did you have to do Michelle Obama for? Which really gets to a point that Brian Boyler wrote yesterday, which I think is really good. He said whether Melania knew she was reading plagiarized text or not, and I think it's quite likely she did not, any more than she knew she was rickrolling. It's just devastating to see a campaign premised on the imagined notion of Obama incompetence get caught stealing from Obama's own operation.
Yes.
The power of images is actually much deeper. They don't just negate something central to Trump's appeal. They amplify one, actually more than one, of the main knocks on Trump himself, that he's sloppy, erratic, in so many ways the opposite of the virtues he claims to embody. And let's not gloss over it. This is a depiction of a campaign that nurtures white grievance and resentment, trying to profit off the work of a black woman from an African-American family that Trump and his supporters regularly belittle. The fact that the plagiarized text in question was about the value of hard work just makes matters worse. It's a mortifying, calamitous, self-immolating moment.
All those things.
Yeah, all those things. And Stuart Stevens.
I wrote that.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it first. So Stuart Stevens.
Yes.
Prove it, right? Stuart Stevens on Twitter basically said this is just a foreshadowing. When you don't have a campaign, these things happen. So you had, just in the last couple of days, you had the disastrous rollout of the vice presidential nominee who Trump doesn't want to be seen with. You had incredible disrespect and still, as of yesterday morning, actually active going after the Ohio delegation and the governor of Ohio, who's still popular, John Kasich, in a state that Trump has to win because you can't get to the White House as a Republican without Ohio. And then you have the fight on the floor, which could have been avoided but wasn't. And then you have the fear and loathing night with Rudy Giuliani screaming at the microphone. Yes. And then you have this on top of everything else. It all goes together.
Okay. Yeah, it was a nutty day, and it started off terribly. I mean, I wasn't even hoping for the Melania self-immolation thing. I don't have any grievances against Melania personally. Certainly.
No, it's an indictment of the campaign, and to throw her under the bus, which is what Paul Manafort did this morning by saying it wasn't plagiarism.
Yeah, and the whole thing
like Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman is the campaign manager. It's the only explanation.
I guess so. Before
I meant to do that.
Before nightfall, and the speeches started in earnest, the convention started off with chaos right away.
Right.
The rules fight, which Parlio says he avoided reading about it in the hopes that I would explain it today. I don't even know if you know what? It was actually quite similar to the Nevada Democratic.
I was thinking that exactly with the guy at the podium there saying, the ayes have it, and who you'd argue with me? Right. I'm the one that decides.
Yeah, and
by the way, don't forget, folks,
this
is all run by House rules, not by Robert's Rules of Order.
True, also.
So if you know the House, you know how that's going to go down.
Yeah. If you don't, you also know. I mean, look, the Robert's Rules, House rules, however you want to do it. The guy with the gavel has an awful lot of power.
I'm the decider. Bang. Mm-hmm. I decided.
There's more leeway in Robert's rules for appealing things, but again, eventually, when it gets to be too much of a headache, if the right number of the right kind of people decide we're not going forward with this, you turn off the microphones and do what you do.
So, as I understand it, you need 7 delegations to challenge the rules. And they thought they had 9. And by the time the petitions were submitted, they only had 6.
That's the thing. Yeah, they had them, and then the delegations changed their minds, and that will make you look for nefarious
at least 2 out of the
there.
delegations changed their mind.
Yeah.
One of them said they had the petition signatures, but they couldn't find the secretary to give it to them because she was being sequestered.
See, that happens too, right?
I can't find her. Security won't let me get to her, and they're not letting me submit this on the floor. I have to give it to her by 4 o'clock, and she cannot be found.
It's like stashing bishops in the basement of Parliament for a
something like that. So there's that. But the bottom line is they decided that they couldn't settle this before going public, and so they went public. And I guess it was the Colorado delegation that walked out, and there was screaming and yelling on the floor. And some people from various delegations, when the chair ruled that the ayes had it, so that the regular rules are going to be adopted,
Yeah.
They kept yelling point of order. Now, I get point of order from Roberts, but I don't know if that counts in the House. That's where the House rules might be different.
Well, they have points of order and points of parliamentary inquiry and points of order. Oh, they have all sorts of similar routes for objecting. But in the House, you just, if you want to, you just say, "Can't hear you. Didn't hear you. Oh, I had an objection. I was making a timely objection, Mr. Chairman." Oh, dang. Well, honest mistake.
All right, sorry, it's over. So, so there's that. I don't know if there's really that much to go into it, but yeah, when I was watching it, exactly, I was thinking, hey, this looks like Nevada.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, the chair decides. I mean, if people don't get that, they haven't been listening.
Don't talk about the chairs. It's bad news. They hate that.
The other thing is that the chair sitting in was a substitute at the podium. I guess it was supposed to be Reince Priebus, but it wasn't.
Oh.
They got somebody else to do it.
Well, I guess by rules, it's Paul Ryan's job.
Right. Well, he wasn't going to do it.
I mean, he delegates that all the time. By rule, he should be there every day in the House. You just appoint somebody else. That's all.
Yeah, and I was thinking, it's really interesting that of all the different times that Paul Ryan wouldn't want to be at this convention, this is the exact time he wouldn't want to be in this convention and being the one doing this.
100% of the time, he would not want to be there.
Yeah. So there's that. Anyway, the rest of the night was taken up by people like Rudy Giuliani and Scott Baio and I don't know if this must have been an interview where Steve King basically said that something along the lines of white people contribute more than the other subgroups.
Okay.
And there was all sorts of comments, throughout the night about basically brown people making America less safe.
Sounds about
bad speeches on the. John Shade wrote bad speeches on the behalf of bad candidate, and the people who made them should feel bad. So even without the Melania thing, Politico was writing Trump's disastrous day one, and then the Melania thing happened, and so it was a terrible thing all around. And Jennifer Jacobs, who writes now for Bloomberg, but was from the Des Moines Register, had written that this isn't a minor case of plagiarism or a gray area. And Bob Fisher tweeted, these accusations, quote from Melania, these accusations about my speech hurt not only me, but also my children, Sasha and Malia.
Yeah. It was a pretty, I mean, I don't know.
It's pretty bad.
I like to give a lot of leeway when it comes to plagiarizing, stuff that isn't really particularly
okay, so thought experiment for you. I get what you're saying. You're right. It's like in the grand scheme of things, a minor thing. Number one, it killed Joe Biden's presidency.
Yes. I did see that objection made, and Republicans saying, hey, who even remembers that? And somebody quite quickly correcting them. Yeah, he dropped out of the presidential race based on it. So, he remembers.
Right.
It's
and number two, just picture yourself the other way around, where Michelle stole a Republican First Lady's words, and how that would be played.
That would be unusual, to say the least.
She wouldn't do it, so it's hard to imagine.
Right,
but
yes. But yeah, it would absolutely be.
She would skate through saying, oh, well, it's no big deal.
Oh, right. Oh, no, Republicans would go bananas. It would become an affirmative action issue all of a sudden.
They'd have House hearings on it.
Yes. I'm surprised that, like I said, by the end of the day, they will. How did she do this? How did she time travel and steal Melania's words? You might as well look into it.
Right,
P.S.
exactly.
Benghazi.
So another issue, which is the overall thing, and that's Josh Marshall. He's got a nice piece here, which I have in the Pundit Roundup, which is called Dominance and Humiliation, No Middle Ground.
What kind of article is this?
It's about the Donald.
Okay.
It's not kinky. We can do it on a family radio show. It's okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I was writing the first version of this post in the early afternoon, there were already multiple reports from credible journalists that Trump was up late into Thursday trying to find a way to find out if there was any way he could back out of his offer to put Pence on the ticket. Mm-hmm. Now, late in the evening, there's this even more detailed version of events in the Times. Trump was some mix of miffed at the leaks, unimpressed by Pence, unable to let the other guy down easy, and looking for some way out of the Pence box. He couldn't find it. On his own terms, this turn of events perfectly captures the mix of unsteadiness, cynicism, and derp that characterizes That's a medical term. DERP.
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 It's a dermatological. I don't know. All right.
Phenomena that categorizes everything about the Trump campaign. But the bigger story isn't so much that it happened as it was leaked so quickly and at such a devastating moment for Pence and the ticket. I've gone back and forth in my mind over whether these leaks are coming from the Trump campaign itself or others on the outside, perhaps people Trump called last night to sound out the possibility of tossing Pence overboard. On the one hand, it seems inconceivable that the Trump campaign itself would leak these details by design as opposed to having some indisciplined or rogue elements in the campaign choosing to do so. But remember, the stupidest possible scenario that can be reconciled with the available facts.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? But the exact origins of the leak pale before a larger reality. They send an unmistakable message coming into the orbit of Mr. Trump, taking his yoke, as it were, requires not only total submission, a total relaxation of every muscle in defense, but a farewell to all independence and dignity. Look at Chris Christie, once strong army figure, now reduced to being the iconic symbol of a shudder-inducing, oddly voluntary, and seemingly perpetual cycle of abject humiliation. In addition to all the hostage Christie memes we saw over the recent months, Trump forces made sure to tell numerous reporters that as recently as Thursday, Christie was pitching himself to Trump on the phone, begging to be picked for beep, even after the decision for Pence had apparently been made. As recently as Friday morning, according to the Times, Christie still thought he was in the running. It seems quite likely Christie only finally learned his fate from Twitter, from Trump's Twitter. As the Times put it with some understatement in a separate article, dedicated entirely to Christie's public humiliation, Mr. Trump appeared to relish poking fun at his effusive booster.
Yes. The Chris Christie thing about him begging, I will say this. On the one hand, I think I want to be able to picture that. On the other hand, that is a very, very, very common play from Trump, is he just, they're begging me to be on a show, but I'm refusing.
Right. So he goes through them all. It's a genuine mystery what sort of hold Trump was able to take over Christie, but it seems to have been total, like a vampire. Trump drained Christie of all dignity and filled the space he once occupied with a raked carcass of dignity loss. Gingrich didn't do as badly, but it was close. According to the Times, Gingrich confirmed by email that he still hadn't heard from Trump about the final decision minutes before Trump tweeted it to 10 million followers. And then we have Mike Pence. Trump apparently chose Pence or got very close to choosing him, decided against him, got cold feet. Pence had to give Trump an ultimatum that he had to commit publicly before Friday's noon filing deadline. But now the Trump forces have managed to spread the word, through some largely irrelevant mix of intention and indiscipline, that Trump spent the day trying to get out of his commitment, doubting Pence was really someone he wanted. So Pence get the Veep slot, but at the cost of being publicly branded as somebody Trump didn't want. Junk that was forced on Trump, someone to whom he owes nothing except possibly contempt. As the Times put it in tonight's article, after his audience with Trump earlier today, Mr. Pence did not respond to questions about Mr. Trump's reported vacillation over choosing him. This may all seem like no more than riffing on a handful of entertainingly pitiful figures, but it's more than that. As we discussed in the early spring, the entirety of Trump's political message is dominance politics. To paraphrase McLuhan, is both the messenger and the message. Trump attacks, others comply and submit. Whether or not this is always true is the story and the promise he sold to his supporters. Trump's handling of his vice presidential pick casts him in an extremely unflattering light, but the heaviest weights undoubtedly fall on Pence. It's no accident that those who come into his orbit, who join with him, are rapidly visited with a string of indignities that stand in a bracing contrast to the power and status they earlier enjoyed. On the field of other political actors, other would-be alpha males for Trump, you are his enemy or his property. The only exceptions are those, like Cruz and Rubio, who remain far enough from Trump's event horizon not to get pulled in. None of this is an accident. We can confidently expect a string of new indignities for Pence from now until Election Day. So that's his whole piece. And I think it's right. And so what's happening yesterday? So Melania gets, it's not her fault. Somebody wrote the speech for her. Yeah. And so she gives a plagiarized speech. She gets dumped on it. And they throw her under the bus. First they deny that it even happened. And then they say it's not really plagiarism. It's only words. Right. And Michelle Obama doesn't own the words. Because each one of those individual words is not owned.
They're free, man. It's...
free the words, man.
Right. And then some of them weren't even words until Melania said them. She coined them that night, right then and there.
Right. And, the other part that's happening, I guess, the original wife, the first wife, Ivana is in the press, dissing the third wife.
Is she?
saying that, look, this is not a surprise. She's not going to make a good first lady. She doesn't like to go to events. She doesn't get involved. I would make a great first lady.
Well, she was the first
but
lady.
This one, not so much. So now, on top of everything else, on top of the mess, reporters have asked us not to keep saying dumpster fire because it's not fair to dumpster fires. But now, on top of everything else, there's going to be a little intra-family feuding, as if that's not happening already. So the whole thing is nuts.
Okay.
And by the way, it's not a good look.
No. But they are trying hard. I do see that there are more people out there now. Just they're just sending their army out on camera to get out there and say it's not plagiarism. And there's certainly
except it is, because every cable and every regular station today is playing Michelle and Melania side by side.
Yeah, I've got it in print, of course, because I can't do it because I'm a radio station. You see, what? I don't know, but I don't have audio of the two of them. But I did see it in print last night, side by side. It was tweeted out, and it's pretty strong. It would ding you in any professor's office. They'd say, "Yeah, this isn't going to work out for you."
Yeah, it's even stronger with audio.
Yeah. Oh well, I bet I'll see if we can dig one up somewhere.
Oh, I got that.
Oh, all right.
But I'll give it to you. Some
send it to me, and when you're done, I won't eat up your time with it.
That's okay. It's right here.
All right, then let's play
from YouTube. Go ahead and play it.
Oh, all right. Fun. I have to click on something. Hold on. That will take me some time. Here we go.
Barack and I were raised with so many of the same values. Like, you work hard for what you want in life. That your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do.
My parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life. That your word is your bond, and you do what you say and keep your promise.
That you treat people
that's pretty much the best part of
dignity
it.
And respect.
All right, well, we'll hold it to the rest of the day, because otherwise we're going to be here for a minute and 42 seconds, and we can't have that.
But that was pretty clear.
Yeah, that is pretty clear. Gideon was saying, the word is your bond thing. That's a common expression. That's certainly true. But yeah, the phrasing, the delivery, the fact that there's more, the fact that it comes in the same place, in the same sentence. I mean, word is your bond. That will be used from time to time. But the surrounding bits of it, I'm sure she didn't write it. I'm sure the speechwriters who did, they might not even know entirely what they did, but I'm sure somebody dumped a bunch of First Lady speeches on them and said, this is the area you want to be in.
Right. So last thing I'll leave you with, moving around from her to the rest of the evening, Greg Sargent has this nice piece called Sorry, Donald Trump, It Isn't 1968. Of course, a reference to Nixon, the law and order candidate, and how Trump is hoping for riots and hoping they help him.
Oh, yeah, okay.
As Michael Cohen put in his terrific book on the 1968 campaign, this speech became the template for Nixon's victorious campaign message, the silent majority thing, one that resonated with millions of Americans who felt the country slipping away from underneath their feet, one that spoke to very real and very raw emotions in the American body politic. Yet, there are many differences between 68 and today that call into question whether such a strategy will work for Trump this time. The murder rate was much higher in 1968. The 1968 was in the middle of a backlash against the civil rights movement, huge social tensions, Vietnam War, a required draft, assassinations, race riots. By contrast, as Jonathan Chait has explained, the scenes of unrest surrounding police community violence masked a surprising degree of consensus right now on the underlying disputes themselves, with most people agreeing both sides have legitimate grievances, thus making an effort to exploit the divisions seem less likely to gain serious traction. Okay? So, in other words, despite Trump's hopes otherwise, this probably won't have the potency as a wedge issue it had in 68. Part of the reason is that Democrats and Republicans have already polarized themselves, and there's not this huge difference within the Democratic Party to exploit as a split the way George Wallace did.
Yes.
Last but not least, he writes, Trump is seen as a far more racially divisive figure than is Hillary Clinton. The new CNN poll finds Americans say by 61-31, Clinton would handle race relations better than Trump. White voters say this by 55-38. Independents say it by 64-28. Moderates say it by 71-22. And even non-college whites say it by 49-42. Putting aside the fact that social conditions just aren't anything like they were in 68, it's hard to imagine that there are the many culturally conservative white swing voters out there who constitute anything like the forgotten Americans of Nixon's time. So, ain't going to work. But what happens? Again, TPM has a nice piece on this. Feel safer yet?
Yes. No.
No. Well, let's go to this piece here, which is really the nub of it. Gloomy old party. GOP clings to themes of threats, violence, and betrayal. We're not even talking about the first wife versus third wife.
Although betrayal and all that. Okay.
Okay. We're talking about Republican convention kicked off not with a celebration of Donald Trump's ascendancy, nor with a hopeful vision to quell the country's growing unrest. The first night painted a bleak picture of a country on edge, under threat from enemies, foreign and domestic, and with the specter of violence never far from the surface. There is no next election. This is it. There's no more time for us left to revive our great country, said Giuliani. No more time to repeat our mistakes of the Clinton-Obama years. Washington needs a complete turnaround, and Donald Trump is the agent of change.
Okay.
Because Adolf Hitler isn't available. No, he didn't say that, but he might as well.
Well, we could plagiarize him.
Yeah, well, the theme of the night was Make America Safe Again, and the programming touched on many of the threats Republicans say befell the nation during Obama's administration. The first portion of the evening was a visceral recounting of the terrorist attack in Benghazi, during which accusations were lobbed that Clinton was not only asleep at the wheel during the tragedy, a fact proven to be false, but that she lied to the faces of the victim's family, also false. I blame Hillary Clinton personally for the death of my son personally, said Pat Smith, the mother of Benghazi victim Sean Smith. The ambassador's family say the opposite, of course. That's not written. That's just what I'm saying. And the blame is just preposterous. It's a tragedy. But how she was personally responsible is something that only a Republican could explain. My generation, that's my commentary. What he says, my generation, the next generation, this is for you. Your war is here, said former Navy SEAL and lone survivor co-author Marcus Luttrell. You don't have to be searching for it. Your people are afraid. I think General Flynn, when he was on there, said this war is about more than bathrooms or something along those lines. I couldn't figure out exactly what he was saying. It was so long that prime time was over, and so Joni Ernst's speech, which is really supposed to be one of the highlights, got pushed to way after 11 o'clock, and people were streaming out of the arena as she was speaking. Not a very good look for her. But they had a lot of Hillary's unfit to be president. She's a liar. She can't trust, this, that, and everything else. Yeah. And besides, the country's going to hell in a handbasket.
That's the campaign theme. It has been for decades for all the Republicans angry with Trump's inability to project a positive image of America. Don't know what you're talking about.
So you have Trump mismanagement, you have Trump fascism, and then you have the Melania plagiarism. And, of course, the plagiarism thing is what everybody wants to talk about, as if the others aren't important. They are. They're a lot more important. But at least it's something you can concentrate on if you're media without having to say he said, she said, or it's an opinion. And that's why they do it.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my segment for today. Got to run a little early.
Oh, all right.
But thank you so much for having me on. This was day one yesterday and day two today. And as David Axelrod say, day two. What could possibly go wrong?
They should just rerun day one and insist it's different.
It works so well. I mean, I don't see why they just don't do day one 4 times. And, hey, you know what? They will.
Yeah, well, yes, largely true. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Well, it's a good start. Thanks very much. And now I guess I'll go and read things off of the front page and just say I wrote them.
Oh, well.
And that'll be all right from here on in.
I can't stop you.
That's right. You won't be here to do it. So here's my abbreviated pundit roundout for everyone.
Alrighty. Take care. I got to go take care of my dog, Bo.
Oh,
see you later.
Okay, you do that. Thanks very much. Talk to you later. Okay. Yes, it's plagiarism. It's a little teeny weeny bit of plagiarism. And also, that kind of speech doesn't matter. All of these sort of things are true. It's not a campaign killer, I guess, because although they would try to make it a campaign killer if it was the shoe was on the other foot. But, all right. So you caught the wife in this, and I don't know. The other implications of the things, of course, people now observing things like, it's weird that she couldn't even give a speech about how wonderful her husband is without, resorting to, even if you want to say liberal borrowing, or even if you want to say she never heard or saw Michelle Obama's speech in her entire life, which seems awfully difficult to believe given the phrasing. All right, so anodyne platitudes about your husband. But again, I will say that's what you're supposed to do, giving this spouse speech. It's just it's very close and seems unlikely that there wasn't some overwhelming reliance on the Obama speech for the structure and cadence, et cetera, et cetera. Now, let's see. Other interesting things about the speech. Joy Reid has a thread going on, a tweet storm, mini tweet storm going on that has something to do with this that I'm pointed to here. Recommended reading to us here. Started about an hour ago. Journey back with me to this past weekend when Melania Trump's unprecedented, is that right, absence from the Pence family intro was explained this way. Melania wasn't at the speech because she was at a resort in New Jersey working on her convention speech. Plausible. With a little clip here with a photo of Melania at a rally some time ago. It says, Melania Trump absent for Pence announcement following Donald Trump's introduction of Indiana Governor Mike Pence as his pick for vice president, or Vic for vice president, as I wanted to say. The Trump and Pence families gathered on stage. So, next tweet, number 3 in the storm here. Joy says, now, Morning Joe Scarborough at NBC, is saying that the campaign sources are saying that some campaign sources anyway, I guess the leakers, are saying that the real reason that Melania was absent was she was upset at Trump's adult children. That could certainly be the case. I'm sure that actually happens quite a bit over a number of things, as it will with lots of families. Whatever. That seems normal. Okay. Let's see. Tweet number 4 here is illustrated by a photo of the Trump and Pence families arrayed out here. I will say this. This is weird. Didn't we see yesterday when we were looking at the really crazy looking pictures of them in those wacky golden chairs? A lot of people were tweeting to me, look at the size of the hands between the two guys. Pence's hands look gigantic by comparison to Trump's hands in this picture. I know we're stuck on that dumb hand thing again, and it was true though. It really did look like he didn't have gigantic hands, but he had normal-ish to large-ish hands versus Trump's abnormally, ridiculously tiny hands. But now I see a picture of the two of them side by side standing up, and particularly the families standing side by side. The Pence family is teeny compared to the Trump. I don't know how tall the Trumps are. I think Trump is a fairly tall guy. And, he goes for the statuesque blondes so that the children derived from those marriages are likewise going to be rather statuesque themselves, I guess. Pence is a couple inches shorter than Trump, but it looks like Pence is shorter than every adult on the stage, and his wife is, of course, shorter than he is, and his daughter is about the height of his wife. It looks like it's been photoshopped, like they've been shrunk, 10% versus the Trumps. The Trumps are just big people. By the way, is that Tiffany Trump on the stage there? So she's getting some playing time too. That's nice. I wasn't sure how that was going to work out. Anyway, back to Joy Reid's story here. So she notes that Joe Scarborough was saying the real reason that Melania was absent from the Pence rollout was she was angry with Trump's kids. By the way, Barron, their son, not present either. He's pretty young, I guess. I don't know how. I'm used to looking at the picture of him from a couple years ago. I guess he's older now. I could see why he wouldn't want to go there without his mom. Anyway, number 5. Number 4 in that series was she was angry with Trump's adult children for pressuring Trump to choose Pence against his own judgment. So that's why she and her son, Barron, stayed away. Now this morning, number 5, backing up, Robert Costa reports on Midnight Hardball show, Paul Manafort is apparently throwing Melania under the bus. Now, journey back to last November to this bit of shade from Trump wife number 1, Ivana, mother of his grown children, regarding Trump wife number 3, Melania. Okay, so here we go. Here's the shade in tweet number 7. Ivana was told at a recent party in New York that she would have been a good first lady. Probably true. According to the New York Daily News, she laughed and replied, yes, but the problem is, what is he going to do with his third wife? Referring to Melania Trump, Ivana continued, she can't talk, she can't give a speech, she doesn't go to events, she doesn't want to be involved. Greg was mentioning that one. I don't know. She was no worse than anybody else I've ever heard who has a fairly strong accent, and so does Ivana, doesn't she? I don't know if she still does, but her accent wasn't impenetrable. I thought she did fine with that. Anyway, number 8 here, the full article in which Greg referred to and which he was using for the Donald Trump's ex-wife, Ivana, slams his current spouse, Melania, right? Number 9. So, are we starting to see a current wife versus kids from the former wife dynamic added to the chaos of the Trump campaign? I guess so. And then finally, number 10, inquiring minds want to know. Illustrated with, you remember those Bring Back Our Girls tweets where everybody would hold that up in a sign and take a picture of themselves and tweet it out? And Michelle Obama did the same thing. Somebody photoshopped a nice one up that says, bring back my speech. I liked that one. I retweeted that. And you'll find that out there now making the rounds. All right, let's see. What else have we got here? Anything else on the speech? Really? I don't know whether there's that much more to it. Unless there's a good, funny thing somewhere that we can add to the pile of jokes. Anyway, it was pretty weird. That's about all I have to say about that. Plus, I love the Rickroll thing, and that was cool. And I wish that was intentional on her part. Who knows? Maybe it was. There's a lot to find out here. Okay, so, about that rules issue. There really isn't a great deal to it besides the comparison to the Nevada situation. I'll take a look at some of the reporting on it so that we can see if there's any more detail that we can add here. I did not get the chance to watch it live. It was on during the middle of the day, and I watched people laughing about it and pointing to it, and I could have turned it on, but it didn't look like there was a great deal actually happening. Lots of heat, but not much light coming from it. But it was fun to watch Republicans fall prey to the same problems, especially this time more prominent, nationally prominent Republican politicians falling prey to that, and entertaining all around. Anyway, I have here this piece from the Kansas City Star's politics blog. It describes the situation this way. This headline: Never Trump forces lose rules fight on convention floor. And they did. Here with the local angle, it's unclear what role Kansas or Missouri delegations had in a failed attempt to challenge convention rules. It's illustrated with a photo of Carl Bearden, a Missouri delegate. Among those opposing the nomination of Donald Trump, he saw his side lose a brief floor fight on Monday. That was always destined to be the case. There's just no way, once the officialdom of the party and convention decide that the best thing to do is just swallow hard and nominate the guy, the rules will always facilitate that. But you can start off by making a stink, and symbolically, maybe it's good to be on the record saying no here in case, when everything ends up being disastrous. Gideon here noting no votes lost by Melania's speech. Biden was still VP. Yes, that's true, but let me remind you that the Biden plagiarism scandal stems from the 1988 presidential campaign. It took him 20 years, 20 years. No, 88. Yeah, I started thinking 98 in the middle of the calculation. 20 years to bounce back from that, and then only as VP. He was rumored to be considering running for president every time, basically, that it was available, every time it was open to Democrats since 1988, and he had to wait out the stain of the plagiarism thing. He did end up VP, but, I'm cool with waiting. If Trump wants to drop out and try again in 20 years, I can't really say I'm cool with that, but maybe he'll drop dead between now and then. So I'll take the delay. But yeah, Biden's problems surfaced in the 1988 presidential campaign, and it wasn't until 2008 that he ended up running seriously for president again, not getting particularly far with it. I never thought he was the strongest candidate in the world. He's been fine as a vice president, I guess, if you just block everything else out and just say, all right, he's folksy and over the top in some ways, but okay, so he's vice president. But yeah, it took him 20 years to live that down. He had to drop out of the 1988 presidential contest. Votes were lost by that. And then 20 years later, when 1, 2, depending on how you count them, entirely new voting generations were in place, and Barack Obama topped the ticket, and then there was this other guy who, if you remembered, 20 years ago there was this issue, and then ignored the 20 years of accomplishments since then fine. You would have a problem. I did. I mean, when they announced them, I was like, I guess this plagiarism thing will come back to haunt them. But that's because I was ancient. And the Obama campaign was one powered a lot more by younger voters and people voting for Obama for reasons that really couldn't be tamped down by the vice president's 20-year-old allegations of plagiarism. But they were true. But it did cost him. It would be a mistake to say, well, it didn't cost him anything. It cost him 20 years. Anyway, let's take a look at the Kansas City Star's reporting on this thing and see if there's any way we can add some light to this one. Supporters of presumptive GOP nominee Donald Trump, and remember, he's still the presumptive nominee, turned back an attempt Monday to overturn the party's rules and enact different procedures for future candidates in the party. Future candidates. That's interesting. I didn't know whether they were trying to... it looked like the fight was about another one of the Free the Delegates ones, so that people wanted to be able to vote or to be released from their bound delegate status to be able to vote their conscience on first ballot. And remember, I guess that would be important given how many states ended up stocking their delegations with people who were essentially fake Trump delegates. They're there, pledged to Trump, but they really were Cruz people. You all remember those stories. Anyway, so supporters of Trump's turned back the attempt to change the rules. It isn't clear if the anti-Trump forces could have used the vote to open up the nomination process this year. The effort was simply a vote against the convention rules as approved by the Rules Committee. It's very much like working in the House. So if you are familiar with the House rules, well, then I don't have to explain anything to you, and we're done. But if you're, a normal person and you're not particularly familiar, think about this analogy. When the House is adopting a special rule for the consideration of a particular bill, this will just make it a little bit more bite-sized and easy to understand. The House Rules Committee meets and draws up a rule, and it's just basically we'll have an hour of debate, and it'll be equally divided between the parties. Sometimes if it's not divisions along party lines, they'll divide up the time in other ways. But, the basic rules of things. Half an hour to one side, half an hour to the other. These are the amendments in order. The others will not be in order. Any certain, sometimes certain points of order against the rule or against the bill are waived in the rule. Anyway, so then they have an up or down vote on accepting the rule. And sometimes the forces in opposition to the bill will say, well, I think I'd be okay with the bill going forward if we were allowed to have a vote on this amendment which got excluded, and we think, we demand a vote on this particular amendment. And sometimes members of the majority actually agree with that, but they are admonished by their leadership nonetheless to vote for the rule and ignore the fact that they support having a vote on this particular amendment, and ignore the fact that the Democrats propose a new rule that would allow such an amendment, and nonetheless vote for the rule as proposed by the Rules Committee. And the reason that they force them to do that, I mean, you could look at that, and if you take everything at face value, you'd have members saying, why would I be punished for, or what's so bad about bringing this bill to the floor and allowing this other amendment? It's not even a particularly egregious amendment from the conservative point of view. And all I want to do in voting against this rule is have the opportunity to vote for the Democratic rule, which is identical to this one, but adds this other amendment to the list of approved amendments. And you would think that would make a certain amount of sense and it would be okay, but the truth is that the dynamics of the way these things work is if you defeat the Republican rule, it doesn't automatically pass, or doesn't automatically come to pass that the Democratic alternative is selected. It's not a vote as between the two packages. It is a vote, first of all, yes or no on this rule. And theoretically, if you vote no on this rule, then that gives the opportunity for the minority party to say, okay, well, with that being the case, let us now have a yes or no vote on our proposed version of this thing. But it doesn't lock you into that. It just throws the floor open and into chaos. And one of the things that majorities need to instruct their caucus members or conference members, as the case may be, is the fact that that just throws the floor wide open. And although the Democrats, in the case of a Republican majority, may say what they'll do with an open floor in chaos and lacking a rule for the bill, they may say what we'll do is bring the identical rule with this one addition. There's nothing that binds them to that. And they may, in fact, just as well, and under the rules they would be able to, bring an entirely different rule with any number of amendments, or a new rule that says, no, it won't be this bill that we consider after all, but rather that gun bill that we've been trying to bring up all this time. There's no, I guess, other than your word is your bond, there's no reason to believe that the minority wouldn't exploit an open floor in chaos for their own ends, probably greater than leveraging this one amendment through. They might, just to build some trust and confidence between the two parties, if they were interested in such a thing, stick to their word, but we never know. Similarly here, defeating the rules package brought from the Rules Committee to the floor doesn't automatically substitute for an up or down vote the alternative rules package proposed by anti-Trump forces. It merely says, we don't have any rules, and we're still sitting around trying to decide what the rules are, and it could become a free-for-all very easily. Basically, for people who come to Congress and don't fully grasp that and need the executive summary of it, the leadership simply tells their members, voting against the rule is an absolute death penalty on critical votes. If we tell you this has got to pass and that's it, we're going to hold this against you, because losing on a rules vote throws the floor into chaos. I don't know why they're so panicky about it, because it's a very easy kind of chaos to shut down on the House floor. You simply gavel into recess, and say, nothing's happening until we can figure out what's going on, and then you rewrite a rule in a way for the bill if you want to move back to that bill. You rewrite a rule in a way that will get you enough votes. Sometimes that means making the concession of adding that one amendment you didn't want, and sometimes it means something entirely different. You just say, put this on the shelf and move the next piece of legislation in line, and when you gavel back into session, you'll be gaveling back into chaos, but rather than recognize somebody who is on their feet seeking to use the chaos to offer some different rule or some different motion, recognize this person instead, and they will move to take up the next bill and bring up that rule instead. So it's not like impossible to get out of the chaos. But what it means when a rule loses is that the majority leader, who dictates the schedule of the floor of the House, will have lost control of that schedule, and something other than what that person intended to be up next will come up next, and that's a pain in the ass, and they don't like it. In the context of the convention, it would mean we can't move on to any other business because we don't have any rules under which to do it. Remember, this is not a special rule for the consideration of one motion or another, but rather the rules for the entire proceedings. So this would be more akin to like on day one of a new Congress, defeating the rules package leaves you stuck with nothing else. You're just incapable of moving on to anything else because there's no rules under which to do it. So it's a much more troublesome place and would absolutely be, like I said, the death penalty to anybody in the House who voted against the rules package and caused it to go down on day one. You'd be in really, really serious trouble. So that's why they just basically engineered it in such a way that whatever it takes, get the rules package passed. And those people on the Never Trump side, this is like really seriously last-ditch effort to try to do something. It might not, as they described it, the rules package they proposed might not even clearly allow them to ditch Trump at this convention. It might have been designed and worded such that it would only free delegates in future conventions, and they would do that in order to, like, just to get a report together so that they could get it, written up and available on the floor, so that in the off chance that they defeated the rules package, the regular rules package on the floor, and the convention is thrown into chaos, you have a package of papers that if you can get recognition from the chair, you can say, I propose these alternate rules, and maybe, if you're actually recognized, which you won't be, but if you were actually recognized, you could say, don't worry, everybody, it's exactly like the other rules package, with one exception. It says that in the future, everybody will be unbound on the first ballot and you can vote your conscience. But it doesn't do that for this convention, so everybody can just stop panicking. And you say that, and then if everybody takes you at your word and stops panicking, then guy number 2 gets up and says, I have an amendment, and guess what the amendment is? It changes the rule that says everybody's free next time to this time. And then you have the giant fight, and then you're exactly where you didn't want to be. So it's important to shut it down early. So they did. Even though it wasn't clear, as they report here, that it would have affected proceedings at this convention in any way with respect to anti-Trump movements. So, with that in mind, the delegates are then asked to approve the rules on a voice vote. And here's where it becomes exactly like Nevada, right? The delegates know how many of them there are. They know that the anti-Trump forces are in the minority. They know that the rules are stacked against them and that the leadership does not want them to win. But that doesn't make them any happier about it when the chair says, let's have a voice vote on the rules package. All those in favor say aye, and there's some aye. And all those opposed say no. And because they're organized and standing at microphones and wanting to give the oral impression, AU impression, that the noes actually do have it, because they know that the chair is going to say the ayes have it, they scream no. And to the extent that the television coverage television cameras are covering it at all, and to the extent that they have the audio hooked into that, they will see back at home, wow, that sounds like the noes have it, only to hear the chair say the ayes have it, and then uproar. Rah. Well, of course, same thing obtains as obtained in Nevada. They know that if they had a floor vote, which they're just not equipped to really do, the ayes would in fact have it, and so they just say so, and then everybody goes crazy and rah, 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 and Ken Cuccinelli throws his credentials on the ground in furor. But the rules pass. That's basically what happened here. The delegates are asked to approve the rules on a voice vote. When the chair ruled that the rules had passed, hundreds of anti-Trump delegates demanded a roll call vote. I just don't think that conventions in the modern day are even really set up to take those votes. I think they do everything by voice vote for a number of reasons. One, they know who's in attendance and who is not, and they know who has the majority and who doesn't. Two, these fights are rare. And three, where would you even, I mean, there's thousands of them there. How would you even gather the votes? There's no voting machines on the floor the way there are in the House. I don't even know what they do. So they just don't do them. Anyway, hundreds of anti-Trump delegates demanded a roll call vote. A Utah delegate moved for such a vote, but the chair ruled that an insufficient number of states had requested a roll call. So they do have that mechanism there. You're talking about, what was it, the seven state delegations have to request a roll call vote. It's such a pain in the ass to take a roll call vote that you have to get a bunch of states to say they're into it. Okay. So the chair rules an insufficient number of states had requested a roll call. The rules say 7 states needed to ask for such a vote. The chair said 9 states had filed the request, but that 3 withdrew. 9 minus 3 being 6, that would be an insufficient number. However, it isn't clear if Missouri or Kansas were among the states who submitted a roll call request or withdrew. And that was another point that the protesters were screaming about. The chair wouldn't even say which states were filed as having said yes, so that they couldn't check if the organizers, if they really are organizers, of the rules coup were trying to line up their 7, and the chair says there's only 6 still on the list. You'd ask which 6 are they, so that you could find out which one of the 7 that you know of is missing, and then go to their delegation and say, what the hell, why are you missing? But the chair wouldn't even tell them which 6 had filed, so they ran around in confusion saying, oh my God. But honestly, if you're at the point where your margins are so razor thin that you need to know which 6 they are, you're entitled to know, and it was a violation, I think, of the rules not to tell them, but they were strong-arming them. I mean, you're going to get strong-armed in this situation, and honestly, the truth is, you can't go into a situation like this where you know you're going to be strong-armed with a razor-thin margin. If the rules say you need 7, you got to be there with 15 for something like this. If you're there with a bare 7, somebody's going to get their arm twisted and quit. That's it. I mean, here, that's just basic truth of these sorts of legislative bodies or conventions or things like this. Conventions in particular, because it's all backroom stuff, and the repeat player thing doesn't really apply in the same way. The convention's going to break up. People are going to go home. A lot of them are repeat players, but they're bosses from where they come from. They're used to doing this sort of thing. But I was going to say, like in Congress, where you're stuck with one another for 2 years at a time, and in the Senate for, in some cases, 6 years at a time, despite the staggered elections. You remember the Gang of 14? You remember that with going back to the original 2005 nuclear option play, the one that sucked? Anyway, why was that a Gang of 14? Does anyone remember? The margins in the House with respect, or I'm sorry, in the Senate with respect to nuclear optioning something, where a bare majority could be used to change the rules. The margins in the House were such that 6 votes were necessary. You had to peel off 6 Republicans and get 6 Republicans to say no to the nuclear option in order for them to not have the majority they needed to execute the nuclear option, which would have meant what? You have 55 Republican senators, and if you had 6 of them peeled away, you would have had 49 votes for the nuclear option and 50 Democrats plus 6 rogue Republicans, making 50 votes against. If you peeled off only 5 Republicans of the 55 in the Senate at the time, you would have had 50 Republican votes for the nuclear option, and Dick Cheney, vice president, would have broken the tie in favor of the nuclear option. So you needed to peel off 6. 6 was the minimum number of Republicans you had to have committed to opposing the nuclear option. And so likewise, they looked for 6 matching Democrats who would say, we'll only filibuster judges in extraordinary circumstances. But again, you never go to the fight with the razor-thin margin. The gang of 14 could have been the gang of 12. But if you lose even one of your 6, the whole thing falls apart. So you need 7. And so it became the gang of 14. You needed 6 to make sure it worked. You added a 7th to make sure that you still had the numbers you needed when push came to shove. And if one guy's spine melted, you'd still be okay. Gang of 14. That's what you have to do with this. And they went with 9, so I guess there's that. But when you're talking about a situation like the convention, where there's so much pressure. I mean, certainly the nuclear option carried a lot of pressure with it. But when you're talking about senators and they know one another personally and they can speak for their entire vote, whereas a chairman of a convention delegation can't necessarily guarantee all the way through that the majority of the delegation will continue to agree with staying on board with a petition like that, you need extra. And they had 9, and that's decent, but I would have gone with 15 because, like I said, all it takes there is finding 3 state chairs and strong-arming them into withdrawing the petition. If you had to find 5 or 7 of them to make it work, that's a lot harder. But it's likely to happen because, like I said, the convention is just the sort of setting where those kind of tactics work a lot better. They're not personally bound to one another the way members of the Senate Club are, et cetera, et cetera. Does this make any sense to you? I hope so. Okay. So the chair said 9 states had filed the request, 3 had withdrawn. It isn't clear who was in and who was out. The floor drama was likely the last gasp of the anti-Trump forces, among them Carl Bearden, a delegate from Missouri. One of the things I hope is that the grassroots members of the party would actually retain or get control back from the party bosses, says one of the party bosses. But he's on your side, the people's side. You see, that's how that goes. The CNN version of the story has it this way. Open discord and revolt broke out on the floor of the Republican National Convention Monday as Republican officials crushed an attempt to change party rules, a maneuver that could have embarrassed presumptive nominee Donald Trump. In a highly unusual show of disunity and anger on the floor of a modern party convention, a group of states tried to force a state-by-state roll call vote on the rules of the convention. The rebellion, and that's a lot more manageable than an open vote of all the delegates. That's at least a manageable way of doing it. Make each delegation, however many there are with all the states, territories, etc., responsible for figuring out how they vote as a delegation, and then you just make it 50-something other people's problems instead to round up the votes. Okay, so a group of states tried to force a state-by-state roll call vote on the rules of the convention. The rebellion apparently caught Trump's campaign team by surprise. They probably didn't expect it because it's a highly unlikely play in terms of success. And his lieutenants were seen frantically whipping votes on the floor to squelch the effort amid scenes of deepening disarray. So tomorrow's headlines, Dems in disarray. Good news for John McCain. The dramatic scenes that unfolded around a normally routine procedure in passing the convention rules effectively turned into the last stand of party forces who had opposed the billionaire in the contentious Republican primary. Those holdouts were not trying to deprive Trump of the nomination in the knowledge they didn't have the votes. But their protest, which highlighted antipathy toward Trump in some parts of the party, may also turn out to have been one of the opening salvos of the Ted Cruz 2020 campaign. How so? Because so many of them were stealth Cruz delegates and wanted to be able to be freed to vote for Cruz. But even if they couldn't be, I guess, if you can change the convention rules going forward, and you all also happen to be stealth Trump delegates, then why not see if there are some campaign or some convention rules that, if changed, could be changed in a way that is uniquely to the advantage of Ted Cruz, and try that. Sow the seeds, right? Okay, so it could have turned out to be one of the opening salvos of the Cruz 2020 campaign, as it was driven by several of the Texas senator's most prominent supporters, who were keen to make the battlefield more favorable for conservatives in future Republican primaries. Honestly, even that is probably misstating the case. I mean, could the nominating rules be any more favorable for conservatives in Republican primaries? I don't think that's even possible. But I guess they think so. Backers of the effort said they would continue to protest on Tuesday, that's today, when delegates are expected to formally make Trump their nominee. You got to make them do it. This race isn't over, and I'm running to the finish line. Kendall Unruh, a Colorado delegate who is leading the Free the Delegates effort, told reporters on the floor Monday night. Where have I heard that before? The tumult of the afternoon receded by the evening as delegates heard from a prime-time lineup of speakers who addressed national security issues. Rudy Giuliani, blah, blah, blah. Then Melania Trump spoke, and that was a disaster. The afternoon furor erupted when Arkansas Representative Steve Womack, who was serving as convention chair, there's our answer, put the rules for the convention to a voice vote, and amid a chorus of boos and cheers from anti-Trump supporters, declared those in favor of the motion had prevailed, while apparently ignoring objections from several state delegations on the cacophonous floor of the convention. And that's one of the things, too. On television, you can sometimes hear, and if you're a C-SPAN viewer, you will occasionally see people objecting from the floor with a microphone, saying, Mr. Speaker, point of order, parliamentary inquiry, whatever it is, and apparently being ignored. They are being ignored, but I'll also say that if you've ever been on the floor of the House or near enough by that you could get a sense of the way, the cacophony there and the acoustics of the place, it's actually very difficult to hear microphoned podia from the floor if you're in the chair and the floor is full of members, 435 members plus staff chattering, even at moderate levels. It produces enough of a roar to drown out the lousy acoustics of somebody speaking from one of the floor microphones. So it is possible to legitimately not hear them. And if you don't want to hear them, that's even easier. Womack then walked off the stage amid chants of roll call by protesters. They should have captured that for Roll Call, the publication, and made an ad out of it. A chorus that was quickly met by loud counter chants of Trump, Trump, Trump from the presumptive nominee's supporters. Oh, and also USA, USA, in case you had any doubt about whose convention this was. I have never seen the floor abandoned like that, said Utah Senator Mike Lee, a key Cruz supporter, as delegates on both sides of the row tried to work out of happen. I'm not sure what that means. Amid roughly 10 minutes of uncertainty in which a jazz band played on stage amid scenes of seething anger and confusion on the convention floor. If you're really totally at a loss, both in the House and at the convention, you can essentially walk away and just say, well, if there's no one in the chair doing anything or recognizing anyone to speak, then anything that happens on the floor is unofficial anyway. We're in recess. And that's all there is to it. And then you can take that time and go sit in the back and figure out what you want to say when you come back out. Again, in one show of anger, Virginia's Ken Cuccinelli threw his credentials on the floor. I bet he picked them up later, too. Frustrated that the chair was not allowing a full roll call vote. Dang, that voter suppression, it really sucks, doesn't it? When Womack returned to the stage and ran the voice vote for a second time, and again declared in the opinion of the chair the ayes have it, several delegates did manage to lodge objections. Womack explained that 7 states were required to demonstrate a majority of their delegates wanted a roll call vote, while those backing a vote believed they had achieved that number by filing 9 petitions. I don't fault them too much for that. I would have said more. Maybe you couldn't get more than 9. And if you got 9 and that was the best you could do and you were running out of time, I'd say run with it too. Womack told the convention that 3 states had subsequently withdrawn their petitions for a roll call vote, meaning there were not sufficient votes to force such a roll call vote. Now, that could be a lie, right? I mean, you could just say, yeah, they withdrew, and then you say, well, who withdrew? And then you don't tell them that. That only makes you think maybe they're just lying. Maybe there really are still 9 valid petitions there, and we hadn't anticipated. What should we do if the chair just completely flat out lies to us? And the answer is, in this case, you sit there and go, and lose. Even had there been a roll call vote, the Trump forces would likely have prevailed since the billionaire managed to win a majority of delegates in the GOP primary. Okay. The Trump forces were also backed by Republican National Committee officials in a sign of a new coordination between the insurgent candidate and the institutional party establishment. Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort said the roll call push was not about Trump. It would have been a meaningless gesture, and it might well have been. That's Manafort saying that. We knew the result. Everybody knew the result, and it would have affected the schedule for tonight, so that wasn't something that was a wise choice. They're very big parallel to Nevada. I mean, theoretically, the only difference really here, I guess it was, so theoretically, normally you'd be able to say, well, look, Trump won the nomination. He's got the majority of the delegates here. We know that's the case, and we would take the vote, and that's the way it would work. And why bother? We have a television schedule to stick to, and we really need to stick to. And that was the excuse, not the television part, but that was the excuse that they used in the Nevada State Convention. But it was a lot more likely to be true there because they had, in fact, counted the number of delegates in attendance for the 2 remaining candidates, and they did know. Now, they hadn't conducted, I don't think they'd conducted such a count here. Plus, also, I guess it needs to be pointed out, if the vote is by delegation, it's not nearly as easy to tell how the votes come out by delegation as it is if you actually checked everybody in one at a time personally, individual delegates, and knew where they stood. A raw vote, a sort of a popular vote count of who wants which rules would be awfully difficult to take that count, but if you had a count of who was for it and who was against it, then you would be able to make that conclusion. But because it's by delegation, who knows how the rules rebellion's support is distributed by state? We don't know. That would be awfully difficult to predict, although, again, the idea of getting 25, I suppose it would take 25 states. I don't know how they count territories in these things, but assuming it's just states that get to vote on the rules, and I don't know why that would be the case, but just for the sake of argument, if it was, and then you say, okay, well, we need 26. If 26 state delegations reject the rules as proposed by the Rules Committee, then fine, we have something here. But if 26 delegations really did have a majority against the rules, would you not have filed 26 petitions rather than 9? Now, it may be that you ran out of time, or you knew you only had to do 7, so once we got 9 and had a little bit of a margin, we brought it up, and based on our previous whipping and counting, we believe we have 26 plus, but here's the 9 petitions just to make sure you have the 7 you need. That's possible, but unlikely. Very unlikely. But there is margin for error there, given how many people are there. There was nobody in Nevada, for instance, who was there as a Hillary Clinton delegate who really planned in their mind to vote for Bernie Sanders at the convention nonetheless, or vice versa. That's much, I mean, I guess anything's possible, but it's certainly a lot more plausible in a situation where you know that there are state delegations filled with people who are only nominally there as Trump delegates and who have been quite open about their desire to vote for, say, Ted Cruz instead. So it's not nearly as clear-cut, but for the sake of patching over a rules fight, it'll probably do in terms of telling the press, because the press isn't going to spend the kind of time and go into the level of detail that we just did. It was probably a waste of time for us, except that we're such a niche audience, we're able to get away with such things. But, you tell the press, look, I think everybody knows that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee here. After all, he won the most primaries and he won the nomination, and we just have to make it official here. We know how this was going to come out, and most reporters will say, yeah. Even I'll say, yeah, it probably was going to come out that way. But by way of differentiating it between Nevada and this, I got to admit there is some daylight there because of the dynamics of the Republican race that weren't present in the Democratic race in Nevada. All right, so what is this thing about Ted Cruz's 2020 campaign, right? Backers of the rebellion insisted they were not protesting against Trump himself, but were trying to overhaul party rules that could change the way a Republican nominee is selected in the future elections. This is about the rules of the convention, Mike Lee told CNN's Dana Bash, as protesters shouted around him. This is about the future of the party. This is not about Donald Trump. This is about having good, fair rules process. That's always difficult to have. Lee said the fight doesn't demonstrate the party is divided. It says there's an honest disagreement about the rules, and we want to vote on the rules. That's all it says, Lee said. There are people who are trying to make a simple debate about people who favor Donald Trump and those who don't. We knew it was going to be close. Cuccinelli told CNN's Jake Tapper that the rebellion was about incentivizing states to close their primaries. Such a move could make it more difficult for candidates like Trump that do not have a long conservative pedigree from relying on moderates and independents to boost their GOP primary campaigns. Interesting. CNN's delegate expert Mike Shields said that the intervention was not about stopping Trump, but the start of the Ted Cruz 2020 campaign. But a senior Cruz advisor told CNN's Sarah Murray that the Texas Senators team was not pushing for the rebellion. Yeah, you have to say that. A closed primary system, of course, could help candidates like Cruz, or Clinton for that matter, who drew from more hardline Republicans during his 2016 campaign than did Trump. Cruz frequently argued that Trump drew support from more liberal voters, and his aides frequently predicted that closed states would lead him to victory. It didn't. It did for Hillary, but not for him. Closed primaries advantage generally conservatives, and that would be Cruz if he decides to run again, said David Barton, a Christian activist who steered a Cruz super PAC. Of course, another faker weirdo could certainly learn to mouth the right words between now and 2020. It really is beneficial from sheriff races all the way to the state Senate races. This is a lot of states have been asking for something. A lot of states have been asking for a long time. I had to include that. I'll insert the something on that. The attempted uprising fell far short of the contested convention never Trump forces had been hoping for. They had hoped at one stage to mount an effort to stop the party from nominating Trump, who some opponents see as divisive, insufficiently conservative, and likely heading for defeat in November's general election. Iowa Republican Party Chairman Jeff Kaufman told CNN that most delegates asking for a roll call vote were raising legitimate questions about the rules that had nothing to do with the nominee. When the gavel falls on this national convention, that doesn't mean the conventions end. In fact, that's where some conversations... it doesn't mean the conversations end. It does mean the convention ends. We know that. In fact, that's when some conversations begin, he said. Right, so take it up at the spring and winter meetings later on. Kaufman said he believes the anti-Trump sentiment here at the convention is a very small fragment that has almost evaporated, and predicted that the prospect of Hillary Clinton as president would expedite the process of coming together. RNC Communications Director Sean Spicer said that several states dropped out of the demands for a roll call vote once they understood its implications. That's entirely possible. They submitted 9 states, but as people realized what was being asked of them, 3 of those states lacked the majority, Spicer told CNN. Lee on CNN said there were 11 states that had submitted petitions. See, now that would be a higher margin and a pretty good shot. But it's not beyond the pale that they would have changed their minds. After all, well, how likely is it that in this case, let's see, 5 out of the 11 would change their minds and say, yeah, on second thought, we don't know what we don't understand what we were doing. We changed our minds. A majority of our delegations now want out of the petitions. That does sound unlikely. But how unlikely does it sound that the nominee would name a vice president and then say, oh, I changed my mind? And we are, in fact, believing that. So they may not be the most resolute people in the world. Spicer downplayed the idea the aborted rebellion, Yowza, was a sign of discontent in the party. 44 states were in support. This is a tiny, tiny group of folks that have made noise, he said. Alex Willett, an RNC committeeman from the Maine delegation, confirmed that Maine was one of the states that submitted signatures and then pulled back. He said delegates said they didn't really understand what they were signing at first. Go run the country, you dummies. Willett, who did not sign the petition, said some delegates were told that if the rules were voted down, the rules would go back to the 2012 rules, which was not accurate. Aha, see? It makes a difference to know what will and won't happen if the rules package loses. I told you there was something to it. All right, what else have we got here? After the petitions were filed, Trump aides and RNC staff could be seen fanning across the floor, pulling aside delegates and coordinating their counter efforts. Just like the House. This happens. This is whipping. Top Trump delegate wrangler Rick Gates said he was confident they would be able to repeat their success last week when the Rules Committee met and blocked efforts to unbind the delegates, as well as a similar Cuccinelli-led effort on the 2020 primaries. Cuccinelli, by the way, had he met with greater success in his race for governor of Virginia, might well have been in contention with Cruz directly for that 2020 nomination. Interesting that he would be fighting for closed primary. I don't know. I mean, I think he's a Cruz backer now, but he certainly thinks that it could easily have been him, and he may still think so. I'm curious about that guy. Though I wouldn't mind if either of them, drove off a cliff. But their families would, and I'm a kind man, so let's say no to that. I just hope they get beaten a lot. Okay, so where were we here? Right, Cuccinelli-led effort on the 2020 primaries. Our goal, said Gates, the delegate wrangler for Trump, our goal is to destroy them. Boy, oh boy. And it has to be. As the convention secretary went through the signatures and petitions, the speaker program was interrupted by several musical interludes in order to get more time. Like the classical music on C-SPAN, except jazz music for these guys. John Fredericks, radio host and Virginia delegate and vice chair of Trump Virginia, whipped his delegates, not literally, to have his state not sign onto the petition. It would disrupt the convention for no reason. He said there's no reason for the vote other than to disrupt the convention and embarrass the nominee. And that's really true. I mean, I know they wanted to change those rules, but that'll really be taken care of at Republican National Committee meetings post-convention between now and 2020. They'll have every opportunity to consider changing those rules later. RNC leaders were confident they would have won a roll call vote if one was taken, which only led the other side to say, if you're so confident, then take the roll call vote. But they say, who cares? We're on a TV schedule here. We know what's going to happen. Besides which, even if we lose, we'll just declare ourselves the winners. So why bother with the charade? Yeah, democracy kind of actually does happen that way. We will do one, and they will lose big time, New Hampshire committeeman Steve Dupree said when asked what happens if the signatures to force a vote are valid. We'll do a vote, and they'll lose big time. I hope they do, so we can whack them one more time. Members of the Colorado delegation walked out in protest as they called for a roll call vote after the voice votes. Overwhelmingly, the floor was flooded with people who were upset with the way the rules were handled, said Regina Thompson, Cruz's state director and Colorado delegate and executive director of Free the Delegates. They want a roll call vote, and apparently the leadership just steamrolled right through the fact that the whole place was calling for a roll call vote, except it really wasn't. A couple of people were. Thompson said they oppose a number of things, including open primaries, language in the rules package binding delegates, etc. She wants everyone to be able to come here and vote for the candidate of their choice, but then why not just have a popular vote? Why have a convention at all? All right, fine. John Stainbrook, an Ohio delegate, was unhappy the roll call vote was blocked. This is Republican family discussion, and our part in the discussion was shut down very abruptly, he said. Hey, you're a junior member of the family. He said Ohio's delegates wanted to nominate a home state governor, John Kasich, who won its winner-take-all primary. I'm not happy about that, but again, we're not voting for Hillary Clinton, so in the end, we would like to have been given the opportunity to vote for our governor, except that's not what people want you to do at conventions, and so they did everything they could to make sure you had to shut up and go away. Pretty routine, frustrating, not really the finest hour for democracy, but, win the leadership, win the gavel, and you'll be able to do what you want to do. It's frustrating, no doubt. But, like I said, in the end, not a model for how you want to operate, but given the number and believe it or not, I'm about to talk about the diversity of Republican delegates, not racial diversity, not even ideological diversity, just how many people, you bring together that many people who all one day want to wield as much power in the Republican Party and in the United States government as possible and ask them to agree on goals, tactics, strategy, from policy from here on out, you're never going to get it. So, there's going to be some backstabbing. There's going to be some maneuvering. It's going to be a dumpster fire. And it was, and it's over. But that's the best explanation for why it was pretty much like the Nevada convention, as I can give you. They knew what outcome they needed to have. They were very likely to actually get that outcome no matter by what process they took a vote. But they had a higher agenda to adhere to, and not a better agenda. Television doesn't trump democracy. That's not what we're saying that they are proud of. That's just what they were doing, and they had something to get through, and they knew what the outcome was likely to be. And you say, well, why not just test it? And the answer is we got a schedule to adhere to, and they weren't on TV in Nevada, but they wanted to get the hell out of there, and they ended up running out of time just the same, right? That's probably the best side-by-side, apples-to-apples comparison. The time limits, the time constraints ended up killing the things, and they just said, God, you guys are pressing a moot point and eating up all our time. Forget it already. We're finished. Moving on. It sucks to have to run democracies. It really does. So the best way out of things like that is to be anti-democratic. In terms of getting the job done, anyway. You can see it's not very pleasing aesthetically. Okay, so let's see. What other issues have we got to share with you here that are important enough to make it into the last half hour of the show? Let's see. Here's a story I'll share with you. Just another one of those. I'm going to shift gears entirely. A frustrating and ridiculous gun fail story. It's always good to shift over to one of those. The other day, it was the one with Jamie Gilt giving her speeches in which she was somehow managing to convince NRA safety instructors that she wasn't negligent in the situation in which her 4-year-old shot her, and it was just a freak accident. You remember that one, driving me crazy. Here's a story that I don't even know if it needs that much embellishment, but it's a crazy and convoluted story that kept me up last night, not because I was confused or angered by it, but because trying to unravel it and fit it into my gun fail reports after the fact was difficult. And maybe you'll see why. The Herald Tribune, one of the Florida papers, I forget where that one's based, but the story here happens in Sarasota, Florida. The dateline is yesterday, but the events are a few months old. Sarasota, again, the dateline, Lee Williams, the writer in the Herald Tribune, about a month before investigators say a fatal round was fired from the backyard at 4632 North Shade Avenue. A bullet that struck and killed 48-year-old David Morse, who was watering plants 200 yards away. Another accidental shooting occurred at the home. That's the setting. What we're talking about here, chiefly, before this point gets away from us, is that, yes, it finally happened. Florida's backyard shooting range law, which even Florida finally figured out was stupid, dangerous, counterproductive to gun rights, etc., because, you can't have gun ranges in your backyard when you live in suburbia. You'll kill somebody. Well, they finally killed somebody. I brought you stories of people being wounded, of the houses being shot up, of kids getting hit, all those sorts of stories. Finally did convince Floridians to scrap the law, and Rick Scott to actually sign the law disallowing backyard shooting ranges. After all, that law went into effect on July 1st, but they snuck one in under the wire and actually killed a neighbor. They finally did it. They managed to kill somebody. That's the story. The amazing part of the story, just to make sure you have the framework here, is they haven't been able to nail the guy who did it yet. And the story will tell you this, will spin the tale as to why they haven't made an arrest and charged a guy and begun the process of throwing him in the slammer. The gun fail aspect of the story, though, besides the home invasion shooting that kills the guy, is there's a second gun fail that enters the picture that provides additional evidence against the suspect that they still can't nail. But even so, with the additional evidence, they can't nail the guy. Check this story out. So here we are. About a month before the investigators say this happened, the fatal round came across through the fence and killed David Morse while he was watering his plants. There was another gun fail. Now, just to make things make sense for you, it doesn't say it until later on, but the death, the fatal accident occurs on May 16th of this year. Keeping in mind that in February, the Floridian legislature decided this whole thing is entirely too ridiculous, even for Florida. We're going to get rid of it. But instead of getting rid of it right away, they said, we'll get rid of it on July 1st. They said this in February. Then in May, blam. Oh, damn, we should have banned it May 1st. Although, who knows whether the guy would have followed the rules, because he doesn't, obviously. How do we know he doesn't? Because he's an idiot. He's a gun failer. How do we know he's a gun failer? Moving on. On April 27th, at about 1 p.m., according to Sarasota County Sheriff's Office reports, Todd Johnson, the Todd Johnson of Sarasota, Florida? Yes. He's 29 years old. He shot himself in the knee with a .40 caliber Glock 22 while cleaning his gun. Quote, while cleaning his gun. So, gun clean fail as well. By the way, gun naming fail. I never really did understand why they would call the Glock 20, why a .40 caliber Glock would be called the Glock 22. Don't you think that should be the 22 caliber Glock? We'll call it the Glock 22. But the Glock 22 is a .40 caliber. Or at least this one is. I don't know. Maybe they have several different calibers of Glock 22. I don't know. What are they, Austrian? I don't ask questions. Anyway, Todd Johnson shot himself in the knee with his Glock while cleaning it, according to what he says. We always doubt whether anybody's really cleaning it, but okay. Johnson is the son of April Lipstein, who is listed as the home's owner. I don't know whether that's really particularly significant, but in case you're trying to check it out, now you have some facts. Sarasota County Sheriff's Deputy Hayden Galoff was sent to the scene, along with paramedics, because he had shot himself in the knee. Galoff was among the first responders sent to the 2400 block of 47th Street a month later when Morse was killed. Now you're beginning to see how this is sort of fitting together. Deputy Galoff noted in his April 27th report at the hospital, Mr. Johnson stated he thought the gun was empty after he removed the magazine. I'll be amazed if I don't jump off I'm not going to shoot myself, I assure you of that. Jump off a bridge. The number of people who just think taking the magazine out. I got to reiterate this. I got an opening on Twitter. One of the reasons Twitter is fabulous. Saw a television writer and film writer, producer guy tweeting about guns and blah, 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 and basically saying what we need in America, there's too much gun violence in our TV shows and drama, and how often do we see it, and how many good, successful, great television series don't have any guns or violence in them. I mean, why can't we do more like that? I had the opportunity to plant in his head, I don't know if it registered with him, but my pet peeve, my smallest bore reform that I can think of is to get Hollywood, if you've got to have guns in your production, please, please, please spend some screen time and some script time showing how to properly clear a semi-automatic gun and talk about it. It's just as cool as any other kind of gunplay. It makes you seem like a cold-blooded killer that every single time you deal with your gun, you're a technocrat when it comes to guns. Hey, they're just tools, man. I'm a killer, and I don't even care. But it's got all the metallic clicking and clacking and cool, slide racking sounds that go with racking around to clear your semi-automatic properly. But it just would implant that idea in the minds of people, remind them that dropping the magazine doesn't unload the gun. There could still be a round chambered, especially if you did the coolo-dulo tactical thing and racked that slide to make the noise and feel the clicking and hear the clicking that goes along with it. There's a round in there and you got to get rid of it. And if you're going to disassemble a Glock in order to clean it, Glock has that, all of them really have that weird design thing where you got to pull the trigger in order to break the gun down into pieces so you can clean it properly. And the perennial problem is you've forgotten that you thought it was so cool to make the racking sound that you put around in the chamber. And so when you go to break the gun down, you pull the trigger to do it, you end up shooting yourself or someone else. But please just put that in there. Put that in the productions. I mean, it doesn't have to detract from the production. It can just be unconscious. It's in there. It works. If you think it won't work, I guess ask yourself, how many people know about their Miranda rights? If they get arrested, even the dumbest people out there today get arrested and they say things like, I know my rights. I'm going to talk to my lawyer, or I'm not saying anything. I don't have to. I know my rights. How do they know their rights? Because they're all law school graduates? No. Because they watch it routinely on television. The thing you say when you're being arrested is, I know my rights, even if you don't. Well, if you just habitually show proper clearance of a semi-automatic weapon, you probably cut down on the number of accidental shootings, which, I don't really give a crap if people don't shoot themselves in the knee all the time. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But the thing to worry about is, of course, shooting somebody else who has nothing to do with it, particularly if it goes through a wall, as it does 100 times a year, and endangers or actually strikes somebody else who has nothing whatsoever to do with the thing. So I think that we can do this. I could probably organize that better as a petition drive sorts of thing. I mean, that's such a small bore thing, and so many Hollywood producers and writers are, generally speaking, politically on our side. And it's no sacrifice whatsoever, because you'll get all the cool gunplay anyway. I think they would actually do it. Anyway, back to the actual story. On 27th of April, This dumb ass pulls the same trick, shoots himself in the knee. Deputy Gallup noted in his April 27th report, he thought the gun was empty after he removed the magazine. When he pulled the trigger, which is required on Glock handguns, and a lot of them, I think not just Glocks, to disassemble them, the gun discharged. At first, Mr. Johnson did not think he was injured, but then felt a burning pain in his knee. It's a very slow synapses Johnson has. That's what the report says anyway. Mr. Johnson looked down and observed a gunshot to his knee with an exit wound on the same knee. He then called 911 for help. I wonder if he had one of those "we don't call 911" signs. The deputy interviewed Lipstein, Johnson's mother, who told him she did not think the shooting was a suicide attempt, what with his brains not being in his knee. We don't know where they were, but they weren't in his knee. And that she fully believes this was an accident. Now, the complications. It is not known whether Johnson was present at 4632 North Shade on May 16th, when investigators believe someone at the residence fired the round that killed their neighbor, David Morse, and others that struck a nearby condominium on the 2400 block of Golf Course Drive. It's near the golf course. Someone at the Lipstein home, had hung a target on a wooden fence at the rear of the property, which you can do, or at least you could on May 16th. But you shouldn't ever have done it. Why? Because the fatal round passed through the thin wood easily and traveled about 200 yards before it struck Morse at the base of the neck. Contacted Monday, Johnson said he had no comment and hung up the phone. But minutes later, Bradenton attorney Mark Zimmerman, that's a great name to have in Florida if you're connected to a gun case, called the Herald Tribune. Zimmerman said the Lipsteins retained him because they'd been advised that something may have occurred at their residence. It's the subject of a criminal investigation. I have been retained to advise them during that investigation, the attorney said. If someone were charged, I would represent them in that case, but I have no indication anyone will be charged. Why not? Zimmerman acknowledged that investigators executed a search warrant at the home and that they took things, but he would not say whether the family is cooperating fully. That's a very loaded term, and finally they're conscious of whether something is loaded or not in this house. That's a very loaded term, he said. Some statements were given. Because this investigation is ongoing, I have not been provided details of the statements. I doubt that very much, but okay. Zimmerman declined to say who was target shooting on May 16th, and it could be anybody, that's true, where the fatal round was fired, or if the family has any regrets about Morse's death. How could they comment? They're not even sure what did or didn't occur, he said, having discussed the articles written by the newspaper related to the death of Mr. Morris. I could tell from my observation of their demeanor the family is deeply troubled by Mr. Morse's loss of his life, but no one has authorized me to make any statement. The family is looking forward to the conclusion of the investigation. A story published by the Herald Tribune last week revealed that even though they know where the fatal round was fired, and here's where science is failing us, right? Even though they know where the fatal round was fired, and they have the guns that may have fired it, on TV this is open and shut, right? Sheriff's office detectives may be at a potential impasse in their investigation. Ballistics experts at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement cannot match the round that was recovered from Morse's body to two weapons seized during the search warrant at 4632 North Shade, including one that was purchased on the day of the shooting because of the poor condition of the bullet. Now, I might ask, can they match the ones that were recovered from other properties? I don't know. I don't know whether they addressed that one. Well, I guess so, because several bullets were recovered from the scene, including the bullet that struck and killed Morse, 2 bullets that struck a residence in the 2000 block of Golf Course Drive. I'm so impatient I didn't even wait for this. And 2 bullets as well as several .22 caliber shell casings in the rear lawn of the 4632 North Shade Avenue property. Sheriff spokeswoman Caitlin Johnston I guess no relation, said last week in a written statement, FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, unable to identify or eliminate the bullet as being fired from the .22 caliber weapon seized from 4632 North Shade. Why did this skip back to the top of the article? Come on, where did I leave off? All right. Okay, so they couldn't identify or eliminate the bullet. In addition to firearms, investigators seized a large section of the wooden fence from the Lipstein home in the days following the shooting. This is the fence that, of course, the target was hung on and the bullet pierced so easily before going on to kill David Morse. When detectives arrived on May 16th to figure out what's going on with the guy who's been shot, they found the homeowner, Lipstein, I guess, painting over the fence. Just decided to paint my fence today, the day they were shooting over here, and the neighbor got killed. But, you know, I've been meaning to paint this thing for it. So all the circumstantial evidence in the world, but they can't match the damn bullet because it's damaged, because, of course, it not only went through the fence, but through the neck of the neighbor guy and killing him. So I imagine it's rather scratched up from his vertebrae, which it no doubt severed. So there you have it. They managed to get a neighbor shot to death on the Florida backyard shooting range law, even after they had repealed it. Now, I would love to know why they waited until July 1st to make that operative. Why couldn't that be on passage? If they knew it was such a dumb idea that they actually repealed it. I mean, in the face of NRA, I don't know whether the NRA or the state NRA organization actually stood in opposition to the repeal law. I think they might have knuckled under to it. So, I mean, why not make that effective immediately? I don't know for sure that Todd Johnson would have given a good goddamn one or other. Oh, yeah, I'm not allowed to say goddamn no more. My line from Rudy. Anyway, I don't know if he would have cared one way or the other what the law said, or that the message would have reached him. More likely, he had just heard, oh, really? You can shoot in your own backyard? Probably in May, and said, this is great, even though the law repealing the backyard shooting range had been passed some months before. Either that news didn't reach him or interest him or whatever, or I suppose it could have reached him, and then he said, well, I better get my shooting in under the wire before July. Hope I don't kill anybody. Whoops, well, so much for that one. Anyway, I better paint this fence. Because, you know, we're not allowed to do any shooting here anyway. So now's as good a time as any to paint this fence. I was thinking, why bother painting the fence when I'm going to shoot it up? But now that the law is repealed, well, anyway, I just thought that was a rather amazing thing. And it's gone with very little comment, considering the uproar generated when neighbor kids were accidentally shot by dumbasses doing backyard shooting ranges elsewhere in Florida. So much uproar that they actually backtracked and undid themselves. Remember that this was something that they actually had to affirmatively legislate, that this was going to be okay. Somewhere along the line, the Floridians said, sure, it's all right that we have backyard shooting ranges. It's absolutely a good idea. Fantastic. Fine. Keep going. But they, you know, even Florida realized how dumb it was, and they repealed it. But, you know, you would think this would have gotten more attention. But because they can't nail the guy, it's not getting the attention it deserves. So I'll give it the attention it deserves. Well, at least among our little crowd of people. Everyone here, go out and be outraged, but tell 10 people, because we gotta widen the outrage on this one. I've fanned flames like this before. Maybe I ought to do it right after I organize the thing about talking to the Hollywood producers. Anyway, I think we've put a good show together for today. It's 10:50. I got to make a note somewhere that all of these shows are a minute or two short. I don't know if it's really going to matter if we ever use them as reruns. We'll tell that will only become obvious to us later on when we make that mistake without knowing it, that we remind ourselves, and you hear this in the podcast and then say, oh yeah, damn, I knew I should have reminded him to make a note. Gideon actually now pleased that he says that he spent a lot of the show talking about congressional procedure, and that he attributes that quote to Melania Trump. Quite right. Excellent. Well done. We have a good lineup. The notes are already in for what's coming up on the after show once we wrap these things up here. Let's see. Anything else we can shoehorn in the last couple of minutes before I tell you what's coming up? Let me scan down. I know I put a bunch of things together here, but I am not certain if there are any that we can squeeze in the 10-minute time frame. Let's see. There I will note for the record that there are over at Gawker. One, there's the rundown of the most excruciating moments from the Trump-Pence nightmare 60 Minutes interview, and that also over at CBS, they have unaired clips of the 60-minute interview with Trump and Pence. And I guess we could see whether they actually edited out anything that we would think was even more egregious than all of that. Here's a fun story related to the convention, since we really do have to end up back on that for the rest of the week. Brad Reed at Raw Story files this one. This one, I'm sure you'll find a shocker. The Republican National Committee, the RNC, come on, Raw Story, let me have it here. I don't know, I'll have to read it out of pocket if this thing just won't bring it up. RNC was forced to close their online convention chat after anti-Semites turned it into a Jew-bashing hate fest. That's a great headline. So let's see. Apparently it's illustrated with a screenshot, for whatever reason, during the speech of former Republican Hawaii Governor Linda Lingle. The chat alongside of the live feed is provided by way of example, during which people are saying things like "Oy vey" and "Make America Jewish Again," with lots of sheriff stars illustrating their bit. And then, anyway, just lots and lots of chatter about Jews and how terrible they are. Apparently, the story runs this way. You can live stream the Republican National Convention on the RNC's official YouTube page, but you can't chat about it live anymore. Why, you ask? Because the Republicans have now disabled the live chat window on the page after it got overrun by anti-Semitic Trump supporters. How did that happen? As former Hawaii Governor Linda Lingle gave a speech promoting inroads that Republicans have made with Jewish voters, as well as ripping the Democrats for allegedly being more hostile to Israel, Trump's alt-right followers flooded the page with anti-Semitic vitriol. Among other things, the Trump fans wrote, "Press H for Hitler," Jews, Joos, ban Jews, Oi Gewalt, and Kike, our favorite. Anyway, some screen caps follow below, amply demonstrating the fact that they are quite correct in their reporting. And that's all there is to it. They had to shut down the free and open discussion online of the Republican National Convention because the people who are interested in following along and commenting on the Republican National Convention are disgusting anti-Semites and alt-right, and I don't even know how alt they are these days anymore. All right, so just thought you ought to be aware of that one in case you weren't aware that stuff was going on. Last thing I'll add here, I notice now going by on Twitter, if I can just get things caught up, otherwise I'm going to have to do it on the other screen. Think Progress tells us what the actual morning activity is in terms of denying that any plagiarism took place. So the official word from the Republican higher-ups is that there just was no plagiarism, period. Is it Manafort's statements? I mean, we already were aware of that one, but let's see. Does Think Progress have anything new about that one? Yes. Only that Manafort has now, I guess, or I am now aware that Manafort already did manage to lay this one on Hillary Clinton. I was kind of joking about that before, but now it's actually a done deal. Where do we get to that one? Let's see. By the way, Trump former rivals turned surrogates Ben Carson and Chris Christie have both refused to acknowledge the plagiarism. Manafort went even further. He not only denied the speech was plagiarized, but accused Democratic presumptive nominee Hillary Clinton of spreading the story because she hates other women. Isn't she the real sexist in all this? I guess it's certainly a pretty Trumpian play, and very Manafort as well. So I guess it works on both levels. All right. Well, let's then turn our attention to what's coming up next on the after show to make sure that they get a fair shake by way of preview instead of getting shortchanged as they so often do in my rush to finish up over the outro music. Let's see. We'll go over to Justice's filing here and get ready for our outro music and let you know. Red Sky at Morning Tuesday on the after show means only one thing. It's Tuesday, you've been warned. You know, each of our days has little taglines here. Ooh, and my alarm goes off as well. After losing recently in the Supreme Court, Texas Governor Greg Abbott bypasses the state legislature to launch another bizarre anti-abortion strategy. Let's go find out what that one is all about. A border wall, not war, but that may go along with it. A border wall is not very popular among the people who actually live there. It rarely is. Any kind of wall. Usually not all that pleasing if it gets in the way of people who want to make moves one way or another. And the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society launches a new campaign to investigate the secretive farmed salmon industry. I didn't realize that was a secretive industry, but I guess it is, and no one would know more about it than the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. For the last half, a visit with Chris Reeves. How appropriate now that the Republican convention has gotten underway. I wonder if they're going to be able to hear from him during the Democratic convention. You going to call in, Chris? That would really be interesting. Chris Reeves, of course, also known as Tom Servo 433 from back in the day. He'll be reporting on the just concluded Netroots Nation convention in St. Louis. Excellent. Love to hear about that one. Also, the ongoing Republican National Convention in Cleveland. And, of course, the upcoming Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, at which Chris will serve as a delegate. All that, plus, of course, the Connect, Unite, Act Daily Coast Community Calendar, and more, as it happens, on the after show with Wink and Justice. That coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. So good reminder for everybody, we have our YouTube channel up and running. I have no idea how they assign the URLs for these things. My best advice to you, if you're still looking for the YouTube channel, is check in on our front page posts, either the morning post that says we're on live at 9 a.m. or the midday open thread, or even the Night Owl open thread. All of them will have a link to our YouTube page where you can find our podcasts while you're on the go on an easy player and a fun new format. We may even make some money.
From Daily Coast Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you for listening, and again, thank you for your support as well. I do want to emphasize that, yes, the YouTube channel is there, and I believe one of these days we will turn the ads on that thing once I can figure out exactly how to sign all of that up. And it may be an easy way to grab a hold of some of that lucrative Google/YouTube big bucks money to keep us going. Thanks.